Some people say there's no such thing as a moral victory. I say there is. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, why the Clippers coming into Footprint Center and only beating the Suns by 9 could actually lead to some good things for the Phoenix Suns, especially once Kevin Durant is back in the lineup. We'll break it all down. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Jase Basketball Show wherever you get your podcasts. A big thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen post-game here on Wednesday night into Thursday morning. If you're finding us for the first time, go ahead and hit that follow or subscribe button. Get a new show in your feed every single Monday through Friday. We are free and available everywhere, so do that favor. You will not regret it. And you can become an everyday or get locked onto the Phoenix Suns right along with me all season long. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 straight to your account if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We'll have more from FanDuel later in the show. But we're going to start with the first quarter. That is our moment of the game. It's a little bit of a long moment. I know a quarter is not a moment, but that is what Frank Vogel said decided this game. And it obviously included the Suns getting off to a slow start, getting off on the wrong foot. Booker called it them throwing the first punch. Whatever metaphor you want to use, I think that is where the Suns lost this game. I just went back and watched the entire thing for you guys before I hit record because I wanted to get my own opinion on second watch of not only how bad it actually was, but what was actually bad about it. And as with a lot of these things in the modern NBA, the team that makes the most threes is going to look better, right? So the Clippers in this first quarter went 5 of 10 from deep. The Suns went 2 of 8. In a lot of ways, that's what you're looking for in terms of evidence. I thought transition decided a lot of this as well. Early in the first quarter, early in the game, the Suns had a couple of different moments where they botched transition offensive opportunities. So that not only was lost points for them, but of course, when you miss in transition, typically it's transition going the other direction for the opponent. And it was. Overall in this game, the Clippers had 26 points off turnovers. The Suns only had 16, despite the total turnovers that each team coughed up being relatively close. So a lot of these things compiled all together. But where Vogel had an issue, which is pretty obvious from the minutes, was the defensive intensity, the readiness and preparedness and mental focus required to defend this Clippers team, right? You would think that a big matchup at home against a hot team with literal all-stars, you're not surprised at what Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and James Harden and Russell Westbrook are capable of, and yet the Suns seemed to be. Vogel pointed to defense on the pin downs, 3-point opportunities that Paul George was able to get. My best read on it is that they wanted Nurkic to step up on the catch when George got the ball so that he wasn't able to just quickly launch those threes. That did not happen. And as I mentioned, from the minutes, the other guy who you would say probably was in the doghouse a little bit tonight was Jase Medical, who got a starting opportunity with Durant out of the game and got the Kawhi Leonard matchup to open things up. Also had a couple chances against PG and just didn't look ready. And I always hate to be the guy raining on everybody's parade with Metu. I think he has earned himself a rotation spot. I don't know how much that necessarily says on this Suns team that has been so inconsistent on the bench, but I think he's earned that. Beyond that, though, you get nights like this often where the intensity, the effort is not consistent. And obviously this team's not asking him to start games, but to not fight through screens against Kawhi Leonard, to, on multiple drives early in this game, allow penetration from the best downhill scorer on the team, Kawhi Leonard, an MVP candidate when he's healthy, and then meander into a lazy switch with Yusuf Nurkic after Kawhi runs that pick and roll. Do we think Nurkic is going to corral Kawhi Leonard on a drive? No. Nurkic's help at the rim. You fight through those screens, you stay attached, you body him, you contest, and then you have help in the form of your center to potentially block that shot or make it even harder on Kawhi to get the look off. Metu did none of the above. And it's not a surprise to me that he sat most of the game as a result. We also had a couple of Beal misses in this game early on from the Suns, where he had a reverse layup that barely missed. He had a mid-range pull-up jumper that clanked, and those were good looks that would have changed the course of, the early momentum of the game. He also had a kick-out three late in the first quarter that was in rhythm, not wide open, but open. Russ helped off of Beal. Booker found him. That's a shot you probably want Beal to make. He was 0 of 6 from deep in this game. And, I guess I'm just highlighting all these things to say it was an equal opportunity, slow start. The Suns were tight the rest of the game. Even in the second quarter, the Clippers extended their lead, but it was only by 4 points. Suns won the third and fourth quarters. So this really was the defining stretch. Booker had a couple of defensive miscues. He also had a couple of nice moments. I would actually even say, in the spirit of being somewhat positive here, because again, I do think a lot of it came down to makes and misses in this first quarter. The intensity was a problem, but somebody who brought execution and effort on the defensive end in this first quarter, even though it wasn't a ton of minutes, he only played 5 minutes and 51 seconds in the quarter, to me was Keita Bates-Diop. He was the first guy off the bench and ended up playing 21 minutes in this game, which was second most off of the bench over Okogie, over, obviously Watanabe didn't even play. Little was inactive with an injury, and Goodwin didn't play. So the Suns went into this game, as they did in the last game, knowing Bates-Diop was going to be a key part. I thought defensively he had a nice closeout against PG at one point. He had a nice double effort where he doubled Kawhi in the post and then slid out. And he just felt like he was prepared, again, with the intensity that it was going to take to defend this team when a lot of guys did not. So, I would have to agree with everybody's read. Booker and Vogel and everybody else. Even Beal said, from a shot-making standpoint, he just needed to be better. I would agree. And you can't have that against any postseason championship caliber team. It's just not, it's not going to happen. And especially what we're going to get to in the next segment, that the Suns are a smaller team that is going to have to defend through effort and effort only. None of these mistakes are acceptable, and the Suns were handed an L on their home court as a result. Big takeaway from tonight's game we'll get to next. It's all about identity, as always. As we continue to learn more about this team, I'll tell you what we learned about that identity, what I think the Suns are learning about their own identity night by night next. First, today's show brought to you by Betterhelp. BetterHelp is the easy way in the new year to take advantage of an easy opportunity to get into therapy. We often obsess about how to change ourselves instead of expanding on what we're already doing right. And as somebody who's benefited from therapy myself, I can tell you that a lot of it's habits, mentalities, places that our minds go that we don't realize that can be negative. And sometimes we have positive habits too, but not enough, right? So if you're thinking of giving therapy a shot, try BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's convenient. It's flexible. It's suited to your schedule. All you have to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire to get the right type of therapist signed up with you. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if the first one isn't quite what you're looking for. Celebrate the progress you've already made in the new year by visiting BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Let's keep it rolling here. Identity. You might know this already, and it certainly isn't helped on nights when KD is out and Metu is inconsistent. But the Suns are a small team. Breaking news. They're small. And I told you when I spent more time previewing this game on yesterday's show than I normally would, I told you that the Suns' route to winning this game was going to be 4 guards and Nurk. Now, it ended up being 4 guards and Bol Bol in the second half during a lot of the big stretches of the game, but that was the pathway. And that was somewhat of a Clippers thing, right? Because obviously their best lineup, their starting lineup, includes, or in some cases, if Powell has it going, it's him, but he's a guard as well, so is Russ. 6 of their best 7 players are guards. George, Leonard, Harden, Mann, Westbrook, Powell. So sure, it's some of that. But it's also somewhat a Suns thing. I would say most nights, unless during the second half of the season, a wing or forward really solidifies himself, not the way Chimezie Metu has solidified himself, but really solidifies themselves, that's going to be the case for the foreseeable future. The Suns are an offensive team. I say that often. A lot of the lineup data will tell you that their best overall units, even sometimes their best defensive units, come when they put offense out there first and foremost. They allowed 37 points in the third quarter, but you probably watching at home felt pretty good about that third quarter. And in the fourth quarter, they locked down even more and only allowed 24 points. The Clippers had only 12 turnovers total, but 8 of them came in the first half. Only 4 of them came in the second half. So to me, that says even more about the Suns' overall intensity on defense in the second half, that they weren't even forcing turnovers. And they were able to get out in transition offensively in the second half, despite not forcing those turnovers. I asked Frank Vogel about running off of misses, which is something I've talked to you guys about on the show a lot after the game, and he said they want to run all the time, off of turnovers, off of misses, and even off of makes, but specifically he has agreed that the running off of misses has seemed to click lately. But all of that combined would tell you that the Suns in the second half did not get some sort of spark because they put Josh Okogie and, Udoka Azubuike and Jordan Goodwin out there and got a bunch of steals and blocks and locked down. No. The Suns were good in that second half because they did what their best at. They were 15 of 35 overall from deep, but most of that was in the second half, where they were 12 of 20 from behind the three-point line. They had 23 assists total in this game, but 14 of those came in the second half. They got to the line 17 times in the second half, only 9 in the first half. The offense was what clicked in the second half, and that allowed them to get control of the game, not play it on the Clippers' terms, which is slow and sludgy and ISO heavy, and you're getting overwhelmed by their length and their size. No, the Suns played their game in the second half, and their game is offense, and their game is small ball, lineup-wise, personnel-wise. That's just the nature of this roster and the nature of who's proven themselves so far this season. But it worked, and it can work, and it will work. And of course, when Durant gets back, it won't seem so small either. It won't be Booker, Beal, Allen, and Gordon out there with the center. It'll be Durant instead of one of those guys, probably Gordon. I also think you have to give credit when you're talking about identity to Frank Vogel. Okay? Because to me, and the coaching staff, I'm not going to always say it's always the head coach. He pressed a lot of the right buttons in this game. He bailed on Metu and Nurkic when it was not working. He, I think, by the end of the game, also seemed to prefer, which I like, to have Gordon out there defensively, even over Bates Diop, despite the length and height that Bates Diop obviously has an advantage with, because Gordon physically was just providing resistance on some of those drives and post-ups and ISOs against the Clippers' stars. He also, lastly, most maybe impressively, rode Bol Bol. All right? But it makes sense, because you don't want to get so bogged down in mismatches and everything else against the Clippers, because, again, that is their game. But the reality is they have a lot of like-sized players, and that's their style, and you have to keep up with it. And so Bol was the guy who, I think if Durant was healthy, the lineup they probably would have closed with was the four guards with Durant at center. Just to say that. Bol was basically filling the Durant role tonight. And what he was able to do was switch out onto James Harden to contest those step-back threes, switch out onto, Paul George for an ISO, and stay alive in those situations, not foul. Be mobile enough and agile enough to not, get your ankles broken. And I think from a coaching standpoint, the most sort of impressive, gusto part of all of it is Vogel, was fine to sort of bet that Ivica Zubac was not going to punish them, and he didn't. Zubac had a quiet game. He was in foul trouble. He had minimal rebounds, only 6 points. And Daniel Tice is just not somebody you really have to worry about in the post. So even he had a pretty quiet game on top of that. It was a smart move that kind of was the best of both worlds, in that Bol still had size. He had 5 rebounds in this game. He was contesting shots even though he didn't have any blocks. But he also can defend on the perimeter, and on the other end, space the floor. He made 2 threes in this game. He kept the ball moving. He was kind of not really setting screens, but more so slipping screens, catching the ball on the short roll. He did enough of all the things that the Clippers were leaving open and kind of their weak points. And that's pretty impressive. I mean, that's very impressive for a guy who hasn't even been in the rotation most of the season. And so we'll talk more about the rotation a little bit in the last segment, but what impressed me was Vogel manipulating the lineups the right way, finding what worked, and riding it, even if it was not what he expected going in and was not what maybe anybody would have expected, even at halftime. But that's this team's identity. The more guys that they can find who play well together and fit into that identity, the better. And the quicker that they can just push the gas on the offense, the better. I just think that's what this team is. That's always the best moments we've seen from them. Maybe there's a roster move to be made at the deadline that gets a little more balance and provides a little more defensive stability. Until then, 4 guards and Bol Bol makes a lot of sense to me. Let's talk about the rotation a bit. I'll give you my box score oddity. I may even have a Phoenix Suns pre-take for you. We'll get to our rapid fire wrap-up segments next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, and the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Forget winning. FanDuel is feeling extra generous as the NFL playoffs roll around, and you get that money straight to your account, win or lose. Let's take a look at some of the odds around the National Football League this upcoming weekend. Let's see. I know the big games are maybe the ones to stay away from, but a lot of teams aren't even playing their best guys anymore. So the Chargers on the road in LA, a game they need. They are giving 3.5 points. They're underdogs on the road. Makes sense, but maybe there's something to be had there. Dolphins, home dogs to the hot Buffalo Bills. Lots to be had there. Live same-game parlays, a new Explore tab for new bets, and a parlay hub with popular combo bets from other people that you can get in on. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup. Take advantage of that. $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Wrapping up the show, let's get to our usual final segment game recap bits, which we will start off with the box score oddity of the night. This is not even an oddity anymore, but I do want to point out the Suns continue to emphasize transition more. Tonight, running off of misses was not quite as much of a success start to finish, but they were able to turn steals into transition opportunities at quite a high rate. And overall, the Suns did have 8 fast break points compared to just 10 for the Clippers. So that they played to mostly a draw tonight, which is a good thing to see. That's not the box score oddity, though. Really what I wanted to emphasize from a stats standpoint tonight is how even everything was, right? These two teams they were within 3 field goal attempts of each other. They were within 2 percentage points of field goal percentage. They attempted 1 3-pointer different, 34 for the Clippers, 35 for the Suns. They were roughly both around 25 to 30 free throw attempts. Both had 10 offensive rebounds. Both had mid-20s assists. The Suns had 4 more turnovers. That was obviously a big factor. But almost any way you slice it, this was a very close game, which is, again, why I focused on that first quarter. If the Suns close out a little harder on a few of those threes, if they provide a little more resistance against Kawhi Leonard, if they execute a little better in offensive and defensive transition, and the Clippers are up maybe just 10 instead of 15, or 5, obviously, would become a Suns win in the box score, right? I know that you can play that game all the time, but that's how close this was. Bench mob vibe check We talk about the rotation. What I wanted to hit on here is Udoka Azubuike, all right? I think maybe there are some Suns fans. I haven't seen it a ton. Maybe it's obvious to you. I haven't seen it a ton online. Confusion of why he went back to, not much of a role. But I think this game showed it because, well, there's a lot of reasons. In some cases, you just can't play him against teams that have a non-traditional center in their second unit. So, obviously, 2 nights ago, the Suns played... Who on earth did the Suns play 2 nights ago? The Blazers, right? And in that particular game, Baji was their backup, and maybe Azubuike could have played. You find a stretch center, it's not going to work. But in this game, what you saw him not be able to do he did play in this first quarter, as crazy, I know you probably didn't even catch it, is that they started to blitz Booker, which is something we've seen a million times. His turnovers did not help the cause in the first quarter, probably something I should have mentioned in that breakdown. And Azubuike could not catch the ball on the short roll in the pocket that the Clippers were leaving open with that defensive scheme and do something with it. Azubuike is not the type of player who's going to make a pocket pass after catching the ball on the short roll, read the rotating defense, and launch it to the corner. That's not something he's good at. He's not going to catch that pass, take a dribble, and tomahawk dunk. That's not what Udoka Azubuike does. So when, I think he had some plays against the Kings and some of those other games where he was starting to string together some strong performances. I think he did have some games where it kind of worked. Even some of the short roll stuff I'm talking about, but that's not his game. When he is not simply catching easy I keep saying pocket passes, catching easy dump-offs for layups and dunks right at the basket in the pick and roll, or setting a screen and not even really having to worry about getting the ball and just being able to gobble up offensive rebounds, or better yet, standing in the dunker spot and just looking for the rebound only, you start to see the limitations of his game. So I wanted to highlight that. I know that's not good news because we did see Eubanks in this game, didn't make a huge impact on it. Bol Bol is going to have some ups and downs, even though I'm optimistic about his execution lately. The Suns do not have an answer at the backup 5, is the long and short of it. And there's not much to solve that problem right now. It's going to be by committee. It's going to be night to night. And all the guys have very clear drawbacks. What I wanted to close out with was a Phoenix Suns pre-take, and that is where I tell you what the national highlight or the national take, the national perspective on ESPN or wherever is going to be. I think there is going to be some hype around Bol Bol if this continues. And it might actually be the rare positivity for the Suns of being the team to figure this out. It's very early. It's not going to happen on Thursday when you're listening to this. But I am getting in on the ground floor of what I believe will be a national storyline if it continues. If Bol Bol is able to play 10 to 15 minutes on a championship contending super team, and it is a positive experience for all involved, it will start to come up. And I think the Suns will get some credit for working him in and kind of pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Every team that's ever had this guy on it has wanted to bail on the experience. Did not seem to get along with the coaches at Oregon for whatever reason. Never could get on the court in Denver. He finally plays 72 games last year for the Magic, and they said goodbye. So I'm not saying I have any read on why that is. I know I've brought that trend up a million times. It might be overly negative, but I'm bringing it up now to make it into a positive by saying it will be very impressive if the Suns are able to turn him into something as a real role player that does positive stuff for a team trying to win every night, because that's hard to do for any raw, toolsy, athletic player, and especially to do it the way that it seems like he's improved, which is executing and making the right play and reading the game. That's really cool if it happens. So I just want to, there's been a lot of questioning of this whole Suns experiment this season, and maybe we're on our way towards some optimism and praise for this whole thing. Who would have thought? That will wrap us up for the day, though. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe wherever you're finding the show. We'll be back on Friday for a preview of the Miami and Memphis games, along with potentially some trends from what Booker and Beal have looked like together. I think it's a good time to take a look at that after their 2 games as the only stars on the court. But truthfully, a handful of them on the court together dating back to when Durant was in the lineup. A lot to look at, a lot to break down. Find that show in your feed tomorrow. I'll catch you then.